Welcome back to another episode of the Take Your Life Back Summit, your roadmap out of chronic pain, fatigue, and autoimmune disorders. And I'm your host, Dr. Heather Yost. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to announce today's special guest, Fran Sussman. I want to tell you a little bit more about her before we dive in and get to talk back and forth. You have a very impressive story. Since 1993, she is a holistic practitioner, and she's actually helped almost 10,000 clients regain their health and well-being, often in ways that they never have before. Fran's strengths include teaching people to heal the gut and reduce inflammation, helping women to balance hormones naturally in every stage of life, healing the brain, Lyme disease, and so much more. She works with clients both in person but also long distance and teaches online courses on detox, cravings, hormones, and more. She is passionate about helping women of every age to claim their birthright of health and vitality. Her personal journey includes not only surviving, but thriving after 2 bouts with cancer, as well as chronic Lyme disease. And at the age of 63, she is grateful to live a life rich in purpose, joy, service, and vitality. What an amazing story. Thank you, Fran, for being here.
Thank you. Sometimes I wish I weren't quite an example of my work, but I certainly have no regrets, and it's been a great journey for sure.
Well, tell us a little bit more about it. I'd love to hear how this all came about.
Yeah. I've been interested in health and nutrition really since I was a kid. My mom got breast cancer when I was a teenager. And this was in the 60s, and it was so brutal back then. And there was just something and my mom is still alive. She'll be 88 in a couple of months. God. And yeah, she's still kicking. She is a force of nature.
Yeah.
But there was just something in me at that point that said, there's got to be a better way. And because her mom had also had cancer that started in her breast and did eventually kill her. I also knew, long before I knew I had the BRCA gene, that there was something in the family. So I was very compelled to find out what I could do to enhance my own health and my chances of a good and healthy and happy life by using natural means. And so it was always an interest of mine, but I actually never thought of it as a career until I had children. And as babies, they both had health issues. Now, I was doing something entirely different, but my babies were not thriving. And when I took them to the pediatrician, they didn't give me answers that were satisfactory. And so I became their advocate. And over the course of a few years, as I figured out what was going on with them and helped them get better, my phone began to ring. And I started getting calls from friends and neighbors and family saying, can you help me? Can you help my friend's daughter? And that was, my kids are 26 and 29 now and healthy adults. So that was the start of my practice. And then, of course, the other part of that is my own journey. And I really couldn't understand why I struggled so much with my own health. It just seemed like no matter what I did, I was tired all the time, and I never really felt good, and I couldn't quite figure it out. So I began putting those pieces together as well. And, over time, I figured out that I'd actually had Lyme disease and several co-infections for decades. And then eventually, after a huge trauma in my life, I did find a lump in my breast, get diagnosed with breast cancer, got through that. And then 6 years later, I had something else go on in my life. And so this is why all these pieces are so important, Right. There was like a resonance of that original trauma, and that was when I found out that I had ovarian cancer. So again, the BRCA gene was certainly part of it, but what I want to emphasize to other people is that I'm not extraordinary in having come through this so well, and I am well, and I feel great, and I have a healthy body and a healthy brain and healthy hormones. But that's not anything specific to me. that's our innate design. And we really can all access this level of healing and health. But you need to put the pieces in place before you actually need them. Because doing crisis management is very different from being healthy beforehand and then hitting a roadblock. So I love your metaphor of a roadmap, and let's talk about that, because I think it's really rich and so apt for the journey that we're all on.
You mentioned that there are certain markers that we should pay attention to along that roadmap. What are some of those markers?
Yeah, and I think, this holds true for everybody, that you want to look at inflammation. So are you achy? Are you bloating after you eat? Do you get headaches? And of course, also inflammation markers on lab work. Are you sleeping, right? So my measure for sleep is you should be able to fall asleep within 15 minutes of putting your head down. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't have a lot of resistance to going to bed. You should sleep soundly through the night and then wake up in the morning ready to take on the day. I got a call from a woman today who said, I've been tired my whole life. That breaks my heart. And people accept that as normal, but it's not normal. It's common, definitely not normal. So sleep is a really big marker. What else? Digestion. We should all be having a couple of healthy bowel movements every single day. And it shouldn't be little balls, and it shouldn't be strained, and it shouldn't be painful, and there shouldn't be urgency or a lot of frequency. It should just be a simple, easy, comfortable part of the day. Hydration too. Lots of people say, I drink all day. How can I be underhydrated? Because I do test hydration. But a lot of the time, if it's going right through you, if you drink a glass of water and you have to run to the bathroom, you're not getting hydrated. It's not getting into your tissues, into your cells. So all of these are markers. Hormones are another one. Again, I don't care how old you are, whether you're 15 or whether you're 80, your hormones should not be ruining your life.
Right. Oh, I'm glad you said that. It's true.
Yeah, and when I hear women who've dealt with PMS for their entire lives or menopause for 5 or 7 years, it's like, no, that's a symptom that something is wrong. You're not supposed to just accommodate to that. That's an indication that something's out of balance. So all of these are markers on the roadmap. And to me, what's fascinating about the roadmap is that it's not linear. It's not like you go from A to Z and you're done. It's more like, and I hope I'm not dating myself here, but I think of like the kids' games, like Chutes and Ladders or something, right?
Yeah.
Where you're moving along and everything's fine, and then all of a sudden, bam, down you go, and you end up somewhere entirely different that you couldn't have foreseen. And it happens to all of us, right? I mean, that is part of the nature of being human. I don't know anybody who gets out unscathed.
Right.
So that's why I say it's so important not to wait until you have to do crisis management, but to really know that you want all these pieces in place for you, not only because you get through health crises better, but of course, it enhances the quality of your life. I mean, who wouldn't rather live with healthy hormones and healthy digestion and a sharp brain and great quality sleep, right?
Right. I just want to make sure I repeat what you said, because I think it's really powerful. A lot of times these symptoms and these warning signs that your body gives you, I think people do push them off like, oh, well, I have kids, I'm supposed to be exhausted. And some of that's true, but your body is trying to warn you. If you're not sleeping, if you don't have normal digestion, if you're suffering through menopause, excruciatingly suffering through menopause, that's not normal.
No.
Like you said, and I just want to repeat it, you say it perfectly. It is not normal. It may be common, but that doesn't mean that you're supposed to just brush it off and put up with it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, unfortunately, so much of the medical world has the attitude that it is normal. And of course, there are exceptions, and I love so many medical doctors that I work with and refer to, but so many people come into my practice saying, you know, I told my doctor I didn't feel good, and he or she said, well, what do you expect at your age? And that could be somebody who's 30 years old, right?
Right.
We're not designed to just break down and fall apart like that. Everything should be functioning as long as we want to use it.
Right.
And in terms of, you know, I think of it like I call it the Goldilocks phenomenon. You know, you don't want things to be too big or too little. So for instance, I knew that I was vulnerable to certain kinds of cancers, right?
Right.
But if it's too big, then you're run by fear. And I see so many people paralyzed by fear. And if it's too small, then you're in denial and you don't do anything that you need to do. So, you know, ovarian cancer is usually referred to as silent, as not having symptoms. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that. That's not true. Every woman I've spoken to, when I ask them questions, they say, oh yeah, I did feel that, but I didn't think it was important, or I thought it was because I was getting older, or my doctor said, don't worry about it, it's probably just digestion. I mean, for me, you know, I found ovarian cancer last May. I had been doing really intense workouts, and all of a sudden I was finding I needed a nap after my workout before I could go back to seeing clients. It's like, that's not normal. So I started trying to, you know, poke around, see what was up. And then within a week or two, the second symptom I got was that I had to wake up in the middle of the night to pee. Again, not normal for me. I don't think it's really normal for anybody. So, but again, if that's what you're doing every night, it doesn't mean you have ovarian cancer. It does mean that something is out of balance. So at that point, I mean, I'm no fool. I went and got my lab work done, and I saw my cancer markers were through the roof again, and I took care of it. Right. And that's not that I know why people live or die. God help me, I'm not in a position to make any judgment on that. But I do think that's a big part of why I did so well, why other people do so well, or why they don't, because you can't go into denial. You have to pay attention to your body, and you have to get to a point, and this is where, you know, what I was saying before about getting it early is so important. You have to get a point where your body cues are reliable to you, you know, where you know what it is to be healthy and feel good, so that when something's off, there's a difference, right? You can tell it's not just making do with how lousy you feel for year after year.
Right. Pay attention to those markers along your roadmap. You've put together practical tips that you call true nourishment. Can we dive into that a little bit?
Oh, let's. Yeah, thank you, Heather. It's certainly one of my favorite topics. Yeah, you know, nourishment for me isn't just about what we put in our mouths. I consider nourishment about everything that we take in. So physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And we are, to a great extent, our own gatekeepers. Now, of course, there are things you can't control. You know, you can't control if your coworker sneezes in your face, or your kid gets mad and calls you names, or you have an argument with your best friend, or whatever. There are plenty of stressors we can't control. But as much as possible, we do want to be the gatekeeper about what we take in. Mm-hmm. And so on the physical level, that is to a great extent about food, not exclusively, but to a great extent. So we want to take in what supports us in thriving in our lives. Nobody's 100% perfect, including me. You know, we all have our weaknesses. But there are also things that I just won't do, you know, and because I know they make me sick, because I know they undermine my health. And to me, that's not sacrifice. That's just common sense. I want to feel good. Mm-hmm. So that's the physical level. But it's also on the physical level, you know, do I want to stay up and watch TV till 2 a.m. when I know I have to wake up? Because it's not even just the loss of sleep. It's what you're taking into your brain. Are you taking in something dark and depressing or frightening? Is that what you want to build your life with? These are the bricks, these are the foundation that we're using to build. And so if we take in the stuff that is difficult, we can wrestle with it. But if it's just negative, then I encourage people to really question that, especially these days. I mean, there's study after study showing that the level of anxiety and depression is skyrocketing now, right? So it really is. It's alarming. So we want to think about how we can be better gatekeepers for ourselves and for our families to the extent that that's appropriate, because that affects our overall life balance. If you have a friend or acquaintance or even a family member that you feel drained every time you talk to them, I'm not saying, stop talking to them, never have anything to do with them again, but you have to at least question what's going on here. Why am I being triggered? Is it something in me that needs to be addressed? Is it really something about this relationship that doesn't work for me? Can I change that or not? So I think all of these are questions that go to nourishment. Social media, people spend hours and hours and hours. And we know now it's addictive. It's addictive to the brain. That's a biochemical fact, right?
Right.
So, what are we going to do about it? We have to be more conscious. And none of these things are going to change unless we bring our awareness to them. So we have to start becoming more aware in order to have more choices, right? If you can't see it, you can't choose. And the truth is that we're making thousands and thousands of choices a day. And the more of them that we can make aware, conscious choices to support us in thriving in our own lives, the more we truly are nourishing ourselves, and the more resilience we develop. And that's where our real health starts to shine, when we have that resilience, when we have that ability to drop and then roll and come back from the inevitable road bumps on this map that we're following. Because I learned long ago, having clients come in when they're in a crisis is so much harder for them and for me than if they work on their health all along. And certainly it's the same, if not more so, for our own lives. When you're trying to build your health and maintain it, it's much easier to do that when you're not facing a major obstacle. So this idea of true nourishment, of really being discerning, using skillful means about what we want to take in, I think is really crucial to our health.
Boy, I do too. And I like that you said there's thousands of things that we do every day. So I think sometimes we get stuck in our stuff and overwhelmed and knowing that we need to do something different, maybe even knowing what that something different is and not doing it. I think it's baby steps sometimes. It's taking a little bit at a time. And if there's thousands of decisions and choices we make every single week, couldn't we change a few of those at a time?
Yes.
And build on that.
Yes, and build on them. Exactly. We want to make more and more of those good choices routine, because there is something called decision fatigue, right? It's why people like Steve Jobs always wore the same clothes, right? So he didn't have to make that decision every day, and he could use his mind to make more important decisions.
Right.
So when we find things that work for us, we want to make them routine, take them off the radar, just keep them in place for ourselves. So I tell people, make the decision once. When you find something that's good for you, you want to just keep it in place. Don't decide every time you sit down for a meal if you're going to eat gluten or if you're going to eat sugar or whatever it is that you already know isn't good for you. Stop deciding that over and over again, and then you can move on to other things. And as you said, really start to build on that foundation rather than having to recreate it every single day.
Amen. Stop making that decision every day. It's true. We make a decision one day and then we question it the next day and wonder, should we do that again? And you nailed it. We do not want to continue to make that decision. Make the decision once, don't think about it again, stand by that decision, trust yourself, trust the process. Because you even said, I noted that you said true nourishment is really dynamic rather than static. What does that mean?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes. There is almost nothing about a human being that is mechanical and static. There really isn't. And so I think it's important to reevaluate over and over again as we go along, because something that worked for you 5 years ago or didn't work for you, it may be different now. You may need to take something out. You may need to put something back in. And sometimes the way that people get stuck is by thinking that what was true previously must still be true because it was true then. But we are not static. And certainly in my practice, part of the idea is that you work on healing the gut, lowering inflammation, balancing hormones. And then if you do that, the overall load in the system is so much lighter, and we can have a little more leeway with what we do, right? Once you get through that transition period and you're in better balance and you have really learned some of those elements, some of those markers on the roadmap that work for you, then you can actually have greater range of motion than you did before. And so often when I work with people, they panic because initially I might kind of restrict them in a number of ways, but it's short term. That's the idea. And anybody can get through a transition, right? You just have to remember it's transition. It's not for the rest of your life. This is a healing process. And then you move through that healing process and things change. Because again, that is our design, that we are designed to heal. We are designed to be in balance. Our bodies so yearn for it. Our entire beings do. Body, mind, and spirit. So as you start to really take in that true nourishment and be a little more skillful and consistent with not taking in what actually sabotages you, you actually open up more choices for yourself, and it can be less restricted than when you began the process.
Right. And I want to dive in a little bit more as to what you do with clients. You've mentioned you've found kind of overall issues when you look at their roadmap to recovery. And I realize we could talk forever about this stuff, but if we could go into a little bit of details just about that healing of the gut and the inflammation, insulin resistance or sensitivity.
Yeah, those are really some of the keys. I would say, heal the gut. People take handfuls of pills. If you can't absorb nutrients, what's the point, right? So you have to heal the gut. And often we can heal the gut by taking more pills, right? Because we can't absorb them. Right. So you have to work with taking some of that stress off the digestion for a while. And as I said, sometimes that means you're on a more restricted food regimen for the short term. But, when I see people who've been on 7 foods for 5 years, it's like, well, that's not what you want. That's not working. That's not engaging the dynamic part of the process or the healing part of the process. It's like, I'm sure, you're a chiropractor. If somebody has to come to you for the same adjustment 45 times, something's not working, right? You want to help them reset their bodies so they can hold that and then build further so that they're healthier and they don't need the same support every single time. Right. So healing the gut is kind of similar to that. We want to put in the support, take out the things that are increasing the stress on digestion or making your body say that's toxic, can't do it, shut down, or increase inflammation, or however that particular person handles it. So we take all those out for the short term. I like to use a lot of powders, even sometimes topical things, as well as a sometimes more limited diet. And then the gut can rest and repair. I mean, it really is a natural process. But once you heal the gut, then you can start to work with other things more. So yeah, insulin resistance, inflammation, and probably mitochondrial health, I would say, are kind of the three linchpins of healthy aging, because all the degenerative diseases go back to those. So, for cellular health, I like to use a lot of adaptogenic herbs. I love them because they're not pushing your body to do one thing or another. They're not saying, your liver must work harder, your adrenals must do. They're just nourishing. So again, going back to that true nourishment, that they're supporting more optimal function. And I love the adaptogens because there are no contraindications. They are meant to be used long term. And usually people feel really good on them. I try to put almost everybody on adaptogens because they can help you with energy in the morning and they can help you wind down at night. The quality does count. Unfortunately, a lot of supplements out there, as I'm sure you know, are just junk. I mean, even things that are cheap, it boggles my mind that companies are sometimes, I think, putting nothing in capsules, and people in good faith buy them and take them and say, well, that doesn't work, what's the point? But if you're using the right things at the right time and it really is what it's supposed to be, then it'll do what it's supposed to do. And I'm definitely not somebody who says everybody should take a multivitamin and calcium and, probiotics and fish oil. No. Again, it goes back to healing the gut, eating the nutrition that is right for you. And then, I would say there are three kinds of supplements that I use. There are sometimes things that you just can't get from nutrition and you have to supplement to get therapeutic doses. There are times when, as in healing the gut, you could do that just with food and it might take 2 years, or you can do it with some supplements and it'll take 3 to 6 months. Well, most people, including me, would definitely go for the 3 to 6 months. And then there are times when you need to address an issue, whether it's an infection or inflammation or something else, and so you can use supplements for that. But it's not like you need to take handfuls of supplements for the rest of your life. Again, if that's what's going on, if that's how you're maintaining your health, then I think there's some underlying issue that's being missed. So these are all parts of what I look like. I mean, when I do an initial consultation for somebody, it's 3 hours. I spend a lot of time. I want to spend an hour talking to them, taking a full history, looking at lab work, and then another hour doing all my detective work, and then finally an hour putting together a program for them. So everything I do is customized in that way. And not everybody needs 3 hours, but most people who've been dealing with long-term problems, who have just, either gone from doctor to practitioner and not gotten answers, you kind of need to uncover all those roadblocks along the way and figure out what happened, where things started changing, and where we got off track. Because again, our design is really for this beautiful, resilient health that is our birthright.
Right. I like that you said that. It is our birthright. And we sometimes have to kind of fight for it, though, to get back on track. If we're on the wrong path, we got to get back onto the right path. Do you have recommendations for your clients on movement, exercise?
Oh, yes. Thank you. That is another one that's so important. Yeah. Thanks, Heather. Yeah. And I do recommend both. There's more and more information coming out that shows that exercising a few times a week is not enough. I'm looking beyond the computer, and there are deer in my backyard right now. They never stop moving, right?
Right.
And it's kind of the way we're designed too, that we are meant to be moving all day, and instead here we are sitting on our sofa, sitting at desks, and we change that for bed, or we change that to watch TV or whatever, but most of us are not getting enough movement. So while exercise is really important, and I do recommend it, I recommend even more strongly that you just get up and move at least once an hour. Twist or bend or stretch, do a few burpees if you feel like it, but it doesn't even have to be anything that active. It really is just a question of getting your circulation going, moving your limbs, even changing your focal length, because if you're at the computer or you're studying, at a desk all day long, your eyes have a lot of muscles too, and a lot of vision problems come, also from the blue light of our screens. But to a large extent, it's also that fixed focal length. So even just looking away, looking out the window, looking at a distance, that's movement too. Right. And then in terms of exercise, I am a really big proponent of interval training. So I have been talking about this for about, 12, 13 years now, and there wasn't that much research on it back then. Now there's slews of it. You could fill a room, which makes me very happy because, of course, it gets rid of the main excuse that people have that they don't have time, right? Right. So 15 minutes 3 times a week, you can certainly not only maintain muscle, you can build muscle. And if I was able to do it in my 60s after chemo and menopause, anybody can do it, but it's you need to be using your body in a way that's appropriate for our design. So lots of people get seduced by more and harder and longer, but it's not the answer. You want to exercise smarter, not harder. Right?
Quality, not quantity.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you're strolling on a treadmill and watching TV and reading the newspaper and drinking your coffee, that's not exercise, right? You're so much better off doing a couple of minutes where you're working so hard you can't breathe or talk, and letting your heart rate come down and doing that a few more times, and then you're done for the day. So, I love functional fitness, whether you're using dumbbells or you're just using body weight, or bands are great. But I like things that engage complex muscles rather than machines which isolate muscles. So those are great if you're a guy who wants to look like a bodybuilder, but for most of us, we don't want a big isolated bicep. We just want to be lean and strong and healthy, right? So functional fitness, moving in ways that are natural to our body, will do that for us. But you need the intensity, and you can't overdo it.
Good, very good. You being somebody who has really traveled over some pretty big roadblocks in your life, do you have one message of hope for our listeners, or even a favorite quote or a favorite affirmation?
The thing that I always come back to, and I've had plenty of dark days, is just to take a moment and bring yourself back to gratitude. And I don't mean to sound like a Pollyanna. It's not going into denial about difficulties, but, on the worst day, I am glad that I live in a beautiful place, that I have a roof over my head, that I have the luxury of eating good food. I have a sweet little dog who keeps me company, and 2 grown children who love me with all their hearts, and, friends and family. So there are always things that we can focus on that bring us back into that place of gratitude and joy. And again, there's so much research on this now showing that even taking a few minutes to focus on that once a day actually increases our level of happiness. So, it's part of my meditation practice, but it's also just the practice that I come back to when I start feeling down or depressed or tired, to just focus on a few things. And they don't have to be new things every day. They don't have to be big things, but focus on the things that really do bring you joy, that you're grateful for, and it starts to shift everything.
I understand that you have a free gift for our listeners. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, love to. I would like to share with them a webinar on, I call it detox, but again, just like nourishment, I want to clarify that I don't mean detox in the sense of taking all kinds of things out of your life. I mean detox and being more discerning about what you want to take in. And most of the things that I talk about, there are 10 tips. Most of them are things that you can bring into your life in just a few minutes a day that will really enhance your vitality, your brain function, and your health. So it's a fun webinar. It's you can kind of pick and choose. I like this one. I don't like that one. You can come back and decide to try something else later, but they're all really easy. Nothing costs money, simple stuff that anybody can do that will really make a difference in the quality of your health. So I would love to offer that as a gift to everybody who is listening to your summit. And we'll share the link for that. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That is so generous. And I myself will be looking at those.
Great.
Things.
I will look for you there. And it was such a delight talking with you. Thank you very much for having me be part of this, Heather.
You're welcome. I wondered if I could close on a couple of fun questions.
Sure.
We've been asking all of the experts, if we were in your kitchen and opened up your refrigerator, what would be 2 things we would always find in the refrigerator?
Pastured butter for sure. I go through, I go through so much of that. And a whole bin full of organic vegetables because I am definitely a carnivore, but I really feel that meat should just be a very small part of your plate. And I encourage people and try to walk my talk with about 2 cups of cooked vegetables twice a day. So there's always 2 bins overflowing with vegetables.
What about if you were stuck on a deserted island and you could only have 2 products or supplements? Which ones would you make sure to have with you?
I'd probably have to take my bulletproof coffee and the pastured butter. And I don't even need the caffeine. I drink decaf, but I still love it.
What's one other product or supplement? Or did that count as 2?
I thought that was 2, but...
we might have to cut you off. I mean...
Okay. I think I could live on that for quite some time.
That is good. I like that stuff too.
Yeah.
It's a great way to start your day.
It is.
For those listeners that don't know, Google it, bulletproof coffee.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not about it being organic. It's about the mycotoxins, because I didn't drink coffee for 15 years and I thought it was caffeine. And Dave Asprey actually handed me a cup of bulletproof at a conference, and cool. I was hooked. I couldn't believe I could drink coffee again. So yeah, good stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. I've really enjoyed spending time with you, getting to know you more and hearing your tips.
Same here, Heather. This was really fun. And I hope that we were able to inform and inspire some people watching and listening. And I can't wait to hear the other talks. I'm sure that they are all wonderfully rich with information. So I'll be looking forward to it.
It's been a pretty amazing panel of experts. So yeah, thanks for being on it. Also, that's our segment for today. So to all of our listeners, I want to make sure, watch your inbox, because you're going to be getting an email every single day that's going to give you a link to that speaker's talk. So we have more additional expert information coming your way. Thanks again, Fran. To our listeners, have a great rest of the day. Take care. Be well. I'll see you tomorrow.